My understanding of gender ideology is that only the person themselves determines their gender identity, and what they say goes. So, personal pronouns matter. They absolutely matter, and the media will remind you that. They matter, except when they don't. Now, according to gender ideology, apparently we all need to determine and display our personal pronouns. If you work for a woke government service or company, then you'll be pressured and maybe even mandated to state what your personal pronouns are. And there's a lot of choices. According to the University of Wisconsin, here is the full list. And it can become very confusing. Time magazine, which these days, in my opinion, is mainly only beneficial for starting fires, spoke to an author and illustrator of a book called Gender Queer. It's an atrocious, explicitly crude and objectionable book. Stay clear of it. And the author, Maya Kababi, has the personal pronouns er and a. So Time magazine said, Time spoke to genderqueer author and illustrator Maya Kababi about er work, the efforts to restrict access to er writing, and what a make of the current cultural climate. Okay, that's pretty confusing. No wonder our children are struggling with English at schools. Ironically, when I was typing up my notes for this episode, I kept getting those red underlines indicating a spelling error for the pronouns, and not surprisingly either. Now, Matt Walsh, the Conservative commentator who produced What is a Woman documentary, posted this tweet in response. My pronouns are and please refer to me accordingly. So here is the official description of when, where, and why you should use personal pronouns.
Use they and them as my pronouns. And when someone uses they and them as my pronouns, I feel like that person is listening to me. That person cares about me, and that person wants to have a conversation with me. Pronouns are a fascinating part of modern culture. I don't think many people think about them very often until someone like myself or others say their pronouns. So when I introduce myself, I generally say, hi, my name's Sam Britton. I use they and them as my pronouns, and I serve as head of advocacy and government affairs for the Trevor Project. I give this before I even give my job because it's the important way that you're going to describe me. Not what I do, but who I am. And that respect for my gender is really, really important.
Okay, but the interesting thing is that those personal pronouns can change whenever, wherever.
It's really important to recognize that pronouns change sometimes. Many of us will not always have the same pronouns because our gender is changing or our gender realization has changed. I think that's really, really important for us to say that the flexibility of your personality should be something that we can respect, and the flexibility of your gender identity is something that we can respect.
Okay, and even respected dictionaries used to be respected, changing the language as well. Now, that Sam Britton in the video, in case you didn't know, is a drag queen and a LGBTQ activist who was hired at the beginning of the year by the Biden administration to be a top-level position at the Department of Energy. Fascinating. Okay, so we're supposed to use personal pronouns. And in fact, I was recently told off by an activist because I didn't refer to him as them and they. That's one person, them and they. I just got confused. But the only evidence that needs to be provided in order to prove that someone is non-binary is they say it. So those are the rules. Pronouns matter, except when they don't. And the classic example was last week. There was a horrendous shooting in the US. In fact, there were a couple, including a Walmart supercenter in Virginia. But you would have mainly heard about the Colorado LGBTQ nightclub shooting, which was immediately labelled as a hate crime, anti-LGBT and MAGA inspired. Now, look, let's be quite clear. It was a horrific attack. Any attack like this is, in my view, hate. And the book should be thrown at the person or the people responsible for such crimes, irrespective of their motivation. It's a hate of human life. It's a hate crime. It's a disrespect for human life. Families will be grieving for the loss of loved ones in all of these attacks. But this is the interesting bit. The 22-year-old suspect who allegedly killed the 5 people and wounded 17 others after opening fire inside the gay nightclub in Colorado identifies as non-binary and uses they-them pronouns. The Associated Press reports that the alleged gunman changed his name just before turning 16 after filing a legal petition in Texas saying he wanted to protect himself from a father with a criminal history, and his father was also a porn star and importer of marijuana. So, troubled upbringing. But networks like CNN and most of the mainstream media, including even here in New Zealand Herald and stuff, they adhere to identifying people with their preferred pronouns and advancing this radical gender theory. But the media seem to have abandoned these rules when it comes to the nightclub shooting. So when the perpetrator is LGBTQ and it undermines the immediate narrative that's being pushed by the media before they've found out all the facts, and whether those facts are true or not, he may be using it as a defense. We don't know. But aren't we supposed to just believe them? But suddenly the rules change. Watch this CNN anchor say she was speechless that the shooter identifies as non-binary. In fact, she denies that he could be non-binary and even misgenders they by continuing to call they he and him. Have a watch.
Attorneys for the accused shooter, Anderson Lee Aldrich, say in new court filings tonight that the suspect now identifies as non-binary. In a footnote to a motion asserting legal privileges, the public defenders say, quote, Anderson Aldrich is non-binary. They use they-them pronouns, and for the purposes of all formal filings will be addressed as Mix Aldrich. So in other words, not Mr. or Ms. Joining me now, CNN political commentator Errol Lewis, also back with me, Al Franken and Joe Walsh. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, that's not anything that we had heard from his background. People have been looking into his background. And I don't know if anybody here, are you guys lawyers? I mean, I don't know if, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, that's what he's now saying.
It sounds like they're...
Okay, well, that's what he's now saying. That's misgendering, isn't it? And then, you can see she is very annoyed by this. And then this clip, again refusing to accept self-proclaimed gender identity.
When we started the show, we got a little bit of news earlier that the attorneys for the shooter are now saying that the shooter is non-binary, and the shooter would like to use the pronouns they, them, and this is for the court in all court papers, and that's what Anderson Aldrich's attorneys are saying. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's complete ludicrous. I believe they're just saying that because they want to have the easy way out on this. That's really, really offending, especially being a transgender woman myself, that a male, which it was obvious with the mugshot, that's a man, that's not a non-binary person, because in no way, shape, or form could they appear as a woman the next day. It's really offensive to even hear that they're playing that role. And if they're non-binary, why would you go after the club where you feel safe at? Why would you do that to a community where you are welcomed in if you are non-binary? Excellent question.
So that's a man. They don't look non-binary. Apparently it's based on looks now, apparently. Matt Walsh, the host of What is a Woman from Daily Wire, sums it up in a series of tweets, and he says this: sorry, but if you're on the left, then you have no right to deny the shooter's non-binary identity. You set a precedent here and we will hold you to it. You have to respect his identity. I don't. You do. These are your rules. Now take your medicine. You have already made it clear that if a male criminal comes out as a woman and is transferred to a women's prison, we may not speculate that his trans identification is a ploy to gain access to female inmates. Same for men in women's locker rooms. Your rules are clear. All self-identities are valid and cannot be questioned ever under any circumstances. Again, your rules, you are stuck with this. The shooter is non-binary. You have no choice but to accept it. Sorry. You know, it's hard to argue with that. Look, this is no defense of the shooter. Not at all. Throw the book at him. What he did was despicable. In my mind, it was a hate crime, just as with all murders, as with all shooters of all tragic events in the US recently, and there's been a few of them, a hate and disrespect for life. But if the radical left and gender ideologues are going to ram down their expectations on everyone else and label anyone who questions them as bigots, transphobes, homophobes and TERFs, which of course they're not, but they're going to be labelled that, then the left needs to adhere to their own rules. And we're happy to call them out on their hypocrisy.